BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Renton, and this is the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, our daily look at an area football team and the key questions we're going to be answering about that team on our August 21st football preview here at Big Country Preps. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood. Dan, and tonight we've got the Roscoe Plowboys.
Yeah, and this is a Roscoe program that's really seen a resurgence in recent years under Jake Freeman. He's had them rolling. They won 10 games last year, went 3 rounds deep in the playoffs. This year's going to be an interesting one, in my opinion, because they've got a decent group of lettermen back and 14 of their 23 guys returning, but only 6 starters back on both sides of the ball, and they've lost some really good ones. So I'm interested to see you kind of if this Roscoe team's gotten to a point where it's rebuilding or reloading, and it's going to be one of the questions we're going to be asking about them here in just a little bit.
All right, and before we get going on tonight's show, we want to remind you, YouTubers, please hit the subscribe button. And then after that, please hit the bell so that you'll get notifications each and every time that Big Country Preps comes up with a new video. And here's a quick thank you to a couple of our sponsors, beginning with For the Love of the Game Broadcasting and our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of K-Lakes 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, 97.7 FM KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is For the Love of the Game Broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. If you're in the market for a vehicle, new or used, give Rob a shout at 254-559-2266. That's Rob Durham up at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge.
And with that, let's go ahead and jump in. I mentioned earlier about kind of that rebuild, reload question we ask about certain programs every year. I think one of the big places we're going to find that out this year is in the receiving core. Roscoe is blessed to have an experienced quarterback. Jace Arnwine played a ton last year as a sophomore, had a really good sophomore season, threw for over 2,300 yards and 25 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, showed a ton of promise. But
Great
he lost his
numbers.
top, yeah, great numbers. He lost his top 2 targets. So Seth Wilcox, a kid who has just been one of the area's leading receivers for basically the last 3 or 4 years, and then kind of a unicorn in a tight end in Parker Gleaton, who was a 6'4" athletic, just a giant target that could catch the ball and make big plays. Those two are
Yes.
gone. So my big question is who's going to be catching the ball this year from Arnwine? Aiden Cherner returns after catching 29 passes for 274 yards and 4 scores, but they're going to need some others to really jump up around them, and I'm interested to see how that plays out.
One thing that might help them is might buy them some time to break in those new receivers is Ivan the Terrible McCann with a good sized offensive line in front of him. So I mean, the one thing if they can stay healthy, can they stay healthy? That's going to be a huge question mark. And if they can stay healthy, they're going to have something to fall back on. They're going to have that running game there while they break in or try to find new receivers.
Yeah, and McCann, you mentioned a massive weapon on both sides of the football, also just a monster on the defensive front as well. But that kind of leads me into the third question. They have McCann back on the defensive side, and he is, like I said, a monster. 6 sacks, 16 tackles for loss last year. But they lose our reigning All Big Country Preps Defensive Player of the Year in Gleaton, who was just a menace as a pass rusher, a guy who could really get in the backfield and make plays. That's going to be really, really hard to replace. So I'm interested just to see kind of what they do to kind of replace some of that production, to replace, some of that talent. He's obviously a big hole to fill. And I think if they're going to play the level of defense they've played in recent years, they're going to have to find some way to shore up that other end spot. So just some question marks there, but I think it's going to be an interesting year here for Roscoe, which has made huge strides in recent years.
All right, and with that, it's about time to take a quick look at Roscoe's schedule. A difficult schedule, but an unusual one at the same time, with 2 open dates in the non-district portion. They've got Holly at home on August 30th. They've got Cahoma on the road on September the 6th. An open date on the 13th at Stanford on the 20th. A very tough game there. And then new home, no pushover either, right there on September the 27th, followed by a second open date prior to district on the 4th of October.
Yeah, a very unforgiving non-district schedule. That's kind of the price of playing really well, which they have in recent years. And then to open district, October 11th at home against Cross Plains before a trip to Hamlin on the 18th of October. They return home to play Winters on the 25th before wrapping up their district schedule with a home game against Albany on the 1st of November and a road game at Miles on November 8th. Kind of a really an interesting district schedule there as well, kind of backloaded with the toughest matchups. It's going to be I mean, this slate is very, very unforgiving. Roscoe's going to have to play really well to win games this year.
All right, game of the year, Dan, for Roscoe. I think we've already kind of discussed this one in a previous episode. It would make no sense to change it. Game of the year for Roscoe. I think it's unanimous. It's going to be at Miles to close the season out for the Plowboys. That one, if they can win that one, in all likelihood, in my opinion, they're going to snag a number two seed.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. I think that is going to be the most important game for seeding. But the three to open district, Cross Plains, Hamlin, Winters, are going to be important to take advantage of that stretch as well and win the games you should win to make that last one important as well. So this Roscoe team, I look at that non-district schedule, and that is just that is just brutal.
It
You
is
got to
brutal.
survive that and then take advantage of that stretch to open district. This is a team I think is going to potentially be better than its record shows and be tougher than people think come playoff time. But I'm eager to see how this group comes together and how it develops because they do have some new kids in key spots.
All right, with that, it's about time to wrap up this edition of the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, the Roscoe Plowboys. But before we do, we want to remind you that on August 21st, that's the big day here at Big Country Preps. That's when we release our preseason football preview issue here at the website with five new teams: Glenrose, Mineral Wells, Graham, Toller, and Miles all in the mix. So instead of a base 40 plus six man, we now have a base 45 plus six man.
And with that, we'd like to thank you for joining us for this episode of our Countdown to Two-A-Days series. And make sure you come back tomorrow when we will be discussing the winter's blizzards here at BigCountryPreps.com.